careful where I was sticking my nose if I were you.
Alright, so to start off, I am using this tin foil and iron trick to heat up the foam, make it look like worn leather. It's a trick that I learned a long time ago. I don't remember exactly where I saw it. I know there's a lot of other channels that have that that video. I probably learned it from Lost Wax, to be honest with you, one of his first steampunk videos that I saw. But it's a really cool technique, and then when you paint it, it really shows the worn out texture and stuff. So I start out by cutting out my pattern. I'm using 2mm What the Foam for this, just because it's a little stiffer, and I wanted it to be thin, but also kind of really feel like leather. This pattern is pretty simple. It's 4 of those brim pieces and just these 2 little rectangles here for the top of the hat. So what I do is I glue together the basically the front and back pieces first. So left side, front and back, right side, front and back. And then I make sure that the front pieces get glued together, because it makes a specific shape for the for your where your head goes. It's more of an oval than a circle. So then I glue the back together. So now I can glue the brim together. It's one of those things where you get seam lines like that just because the foam that you're working with isn't long enough to make the full piece, so you have to kind of piece it together. But it's not too big of a deal. I try to put that towards the back so you don't see it too much. All I'm doing is I am gluing this brim to the inside. So I make sure that the piece of foam is touching the bench first, and then I push it against the brim of the hat, just to make sure that it's tacked in place. And I can go back through and I can really push it together to make sure that it's permanent. You can see that it's kind of a process, but like I always say, if you just go slow, it'll be alright. And this already has glue on the edge, both edges. So when I finally get these seams to meet up, I make sure that the bottom corner is glued against the brim first. You can't really see because my hand is kind of in the way, but I make sure that bottom is glued first, and then I tack the top together just to make sure that it lines up, and then I work my way back down and glue the seam through the middle. And then, like I said, go back around and push those 2s together pretty good. So this piece of cardboard here, this is actually the pattern that I was working with originally to get the shape of the brim and to size it and everything. So I'm actually just using that to hold the top piece in place so that I can glue this, I guess the top piece on the. I don't know exactly what that's called. So it's not basically the part where your head goes. It's the top of that. And so what I'm doing with the cardboard is I'm just putting that on there so it helps keep its shape, so it's not all floppy and moving around when you're trying to glue this top piece on. That top piece was just cut out from that pattern. What you guys can do is once you get your base of your hat done, just flip it upside down and use a pen to trace the shape from the top of the hat, and just cut that out and glue it on. And then use your rotary tool just to kind of clean up the seams, kind of round out the corners so they're not like crisp cut lines, So this is some 5mm craft foam. This is the band that goes around the hat. So what I'm doing is I'm just using my X-Acto knife to score some of these lines, and I'm using the heat gun to heat them up, and that will heat the foam and expand it so that you get these nice panel lines. Then I go back through and I cut all these squares out. I was going to originally put these pieces back in and cut them thinner so that they're recessed, but in the end I decided not to do that. I just painted the foam. The back of the foam is the hat anyway, and it's black, so you really don't see it. So it's just a time saver, and you really don't need to do it. So I use this now, and I glue the middle first to the seam in the middle. Make sure that the middle is lined up, and then I start working my way around the hat and tacking it in place, making sure that the bottom touches the brim the whole time around. You can see how I'm gluing the bottom down, making sure that it's touching against the brim. I always like to tack the foam in place first, just to make sure everything's lined up and it's on the seam line, and then I go back over and I really press it together to really make sure that contact cement presses together good. So I heated up the bottom of the top of the hat, and now I'm just putting some weight on it just to give it that curved indent that it kind of has. It's not completely flat. It's got like a little bowl shape on top. So now with all that done, it's time to seal it. So I'm using some Mod Podge. And I just go around with the Mod Podge, and I put about, I think, 2 or 3 coats on. The foam doesn't really need a whole lot of sealing. It can almost just be painted straight away, just because it's such a rigid foam that there's really not a whole lot of like gaps and stuff in it. So after the Mod Podge, I go through with just some flat black, just some acrylic paint, and I just paint the whole thing black. The black will give you a good base coat for the brown leather and also the metal that top detail piece is. I like the design of this hat for Cad Bane. It's kind of funny to me too, because it's very clearly just a normal Western style hat, and then they just glued some greeblies on top. So I mean, but that's what Star Wars is. So it's kind of why I like it, because it's kind of it's, you know, it's both things. It's Star Wars and Western, which is, you know, the whole kind of feel of the Mandalorian and a little bit of Book of Boba Fett, and I really like that aesthetic. Space Western has always been really cool to me. So this is just some brown, and I'm just going through and I'm just dry brushing on top of the black, trying to cover the entire thing with color, but not painting the whole thing. You know what I mean? Not just painting the whole hat, but I'm really trying to dry brush layer and layer and layer of this paint to make it try to cover the whole thing, but also so you still see a lot of the black underneath. You can see how I kind of spend a lot of time in one spot just to try to make sure that paint goes a long way. The other painting technique you can do with leather is to put it on kind of thick, and then like I'm doing here, I'm taking my rag and I'm just dabbing all the high areas off, and just making sure that paint doesn't cover over that black completely. It's just to kind of give it a color on top of the black. Some people like to paint in a way where they're painting the reverse, where they do light to black, so they paint all their light colors first and then their darker colors. I've always been dark to light, so I start off dark and I keep adding lighter colors to the end, and then I do a black wash at the end, which kind of brings it all together. So this is just a little bit of lighter paint. You notice on a lot of like worn leather that the edges and the places that get rubbed and creased and bent a lot, the leather kind of starts to break down if you don't seal your leather with it's like leather sealer. They make it for like boots and stuff like that, so the leather doesn't crack. It keeps it moisturized, since it's, you know, it's basically skin. So you keep it moisturized, but in space and in the Star Wars, there's no moisturizer for leather, especially on Tatooine. I wouldn't expect there to be anything like that. So I'm going through and I'm just adding some heavy weathering, just to make it look like it's an old piece of leather. Cad Bane has been a bounty hunter for a long time, so it makes sense that he's got this old hat that he's always worn, and it would be, you know, it gets dry, it gets wet, and so it would be faded and it'd be cracked and stuff. So taking a little bit of silver here, and I paint that whole greebly brim piece, painted all silver. It's kind of a fun build because it's kind of a basic shape, and it doesn't have a whole lot of detail pieces on top. This greebly piece on top is the most detailed part of the build, and it's, you know, it's a rectangle kind of thing, and it went together quick, and it was fun to do, and I think it looks pretty cool hanging up on the wall. You can see how long it takes to paint silver by hand. I'm trying to avoid like brush strokes, so I try to just paint small areas. So now I'm going through with some black wash, and I'm putting this on heavy. What this does too with the leather is it kind of dulls it out, but it also knocks back some of the brighter browns that I put on there for the weathering. It kind of keeps the color, but it also kind of mutes it and really helps it kind of fade into the background. So you can tell that it's there, but it also kind of looks like even the spots that have been worn out have been worn out for a while, and they're weathered themselves. You know, they get wet and stuff. So that is it. That is my Cad Bane hat from the Book of Boba Fett. I hope you guys liked it, and I will see you again next week.